But Ariana, see, you made it seem like this was way too easy for us. Like, we're like, oh yeah, Ariana did this, association success. We got this. I'm like, wow, this was, I think, the hardest thing I had to do in my career.
So Sherry, before the first surge, I remember my low point was being in a conference room in fetal position in the corner.
Yeah.
So
I was there on Sunday evening, and Kevin was talking to me, and I'm like, oh, we're running out of time. I was at that moment. I'm like, he's like, can we do X next? I'm like, no.
I was actually thinking about this recently, how humans don't seem to be very, very well adapted to technology. It's like, for some reason, it's the thing that gets us the most stressed out over anything. I remember this was years ago doing a webinar where the audio wasn't working at all. So the whole thing basically had to be rescheduled. It was a big nightmare. And I met up with my friend after, and I was like, man, I had the worst day ever. And he's a nurse, and he's like, me too. I couldn't get to my patients in time, and people were suffering. He's like, what about you? And I'm like, let's talk about something else.
You're like, I'm good.
Yeah.
You win. I had a boss. Well, I had my boss was like, they were like on the same level, but it was like my boss, this woman, Cheryl, and I didn't really get along with Cheryl that well. She was just kind of scared me. But then he was not available, so I had to go to her for something. And she looked at me, she's like, Sherry, no one's bleeding, no one's dying. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, you're good. So then I decided, I'm like, okay, she can't be that mean if she just said that. But I was like, yeah.
I can say I'm the worst on event day. My team actually started to have me go to the gym basically the hours before the events would start, because I'd be so stressed out that it would impact the rest of the room. So
okay, we're live.
Oh,
all right.
Oops.
We're good. So so great. Well, what do you guys, I think we said we'd get started in the agenda at like 12:30. I mean, 2:30. What time is it? See, Ariana, now I'm like, it's been a day, right?
So I believe you're set to start in 5 minutes. So this is when all of us kind of make interesting chatter and banter and ask how everyone's event has gone. That's and right. See an image in an image.
Looks like we're live.
So
can Matt, can you say something to prove you're a human and not an AI?
I hope I am still a human, and so much video conversation could kind of change the AI side of things. But hopefully,
so the attendees are saying that we're live now, so I guess we're done with the banter.
They're tired of hearing the banter. Is that what I understand?
Move on, folks. Give us answers.
All right, great. Well, thank you guys. This was really good information that you were all shared with us today. Hopefully next fall we can all be together. But in the meantime, we did have some questions that came through today, and as people have other questions, feel free to jump in and ask away. But let me start with Michelle. One of the questions was, with the pandemic, are you seeing a change in the way that associations are approaching online learning?
Yeah, we're seeing an awful lot of different approaches from different kinds of associations. We've been really impressed with the agility and creativity of associations as they try to grapple with this huge change that's been thrust upon them. But yeah, we've got some associations are coming to us and they're looking for a way to deliver virtual events because of the urgency to convert pre-planned conferences and seminars. And then some are just looking for ways that they can do more with their education programs, to kind of rejuvenate them, make them more interesting for members, like add badges or learning pathways, trying to really kind of increase participation. With the ones coming to us looking for virtual events, we've really been trying to help them to see how, if they delivered that event through their LMS, that it can be an entry point to their online learning programs as they try to kind of create ways then to continue the learning experience after the event with discussion forums and, that sort of thing, you know, and kind of encourage people to who are attending the event as a way to kind of as an entry point to kind of pursuing further education with them and kind of maybe on a path to membership.
Great. Thanks. So we have a question from Ron Moen. Ron's asked about us having a speaker room for presenters to network, and that they're considering doing that at Chest. We did not do that. Within the platform, we could meet up with folks, but we did not do that today. Anybody, Ariana or Dan, any of you, Eric, did you guys set up any sort of speaker room to network between sessions?
So I can speak to that a little bit. It's funny, the idea for that hit. So I'm a virtual event producer, and the idea for that approach actually hit when I was a speaker of a virtual event, because there were a lot of other speakers who I recognized, and I was like, man, I wish I could just go and talk to them, and realize that would be the case across the board. That a lot of the events, this is a sub community within the larger one that's coming together to, create something amazing, and so creating kind of that moment of connection is a valuable thing. I would also say that it is a way for the speakers to then hear from each other, kind of that feedback, like, oh, I heard your session, it was great. That's one thing that gets removed a little bit in the virtual environment, is that, special moment of being in front of the room and kind of seeing right away the reaction. So I love Ron's approach. My recommendation is to have a specific networking moment rather than a room that's open the entire time, depending on the size of the event, bringing everyone kind of together at the same time to celebrate that victory of having done this together.
I'd actually like to add from an attendee perspective. So this is Howard Pollack with Community Brands. I agree with Ariana in that you want to create a meaningful conversation and kind of topics or subgroups of people. Today will be the end of my third online event conference, and I've taken great things from each, and I'm trying to avoid other things from some of the others. So there was one where there was you were allowed office hours as a vendor to have people come in and visit you, and it was through the use of avatars. So you really weren't using your face, but it was kind of fun to do that. But they did have kind of networking events, but Ariana, they were wide open, like you said, try to avoid, because people didn't really know why they were there. They were connecting with people they knew, but not really networking with the whole team or the whole group of people that could have been there. So this concept of a speaker event or a subset of the attendees that's going to bring them together with some commonality, I think could be super successful.
If I could add to that, I found a similar social dynamic when it comes to the exhibitor hall booths. We've had some events where it's all condensed, and others where it's prolonged over time. And the ones where those time blocks are condensed end up being the ones that do so much better. And as far as the challenging part is the social dynamic of people entering a room as the conversation's already going. We're really interested to see the dynamics in those rooms. So we ran a whole kind of study around it. And we saw that if you had people in the room and somebody else was coming in, sometimes they'd be shy to start talking, like go mute themselves and be off video. And if they weren't kind of welcomed into the space, they would just leave. And then that was a lead that kind of went away. Sorry.
I think Sherry, it speaks to the whole, every opportunity is to look at all stakeholders and set those objectives and goals. So there's members, there's speakers, there's exhibitors, sponsors, and of course the staff too. And I think it's finding that balance across all of those stakeholders that really makes for a great experience and forces you to think about the comments like Howard and Ariana just made, so that things are set up logically. Setting up those breakouts to be, it's kind of like, if you go to a restaurant, there's two restaurants, one's got a line and one doesn't. Which one do you stand in? The one with the line, because you think it's going to be better. And so setting up those opportunities that create, there's an urgency to go in, actually work better than those all day wide open events.
So with that said, let's see. Oh, wait. Well, Howard, I guess we have to ask you this because Ron Moen said he'll send you a Starbucks card if you can send him the three of the lessons learned from doing these 3 events. So.
I will do that, and without kind of pointing out at the events, I'm sure that actually the people on this call have attended all 3 of those. It was AMS Fest, ASAE Annual, and this one. And each of them took a slightly different approach. Each of them used a different platform. And again, AMS Fest had some fun avatars. Verbella, I think it was called, was the platform. Pretty cool stuff, but lacked a little bit in the networking capability. And you kind of had to be in your office the whole day. And so it was a little bit harder to make use of a good day. ASAE Annual was just wide open. I think I heard Kevin, or it was Kevin, I think, in his presentation, where if you don't charge for your event, then you're getting great attendance or a lot of people registering, but what's the value? And from a vendor perspective, what's the value of that lead that might be visiting your booth? Because again, these people didn't pay. So they had record numbers of attendees, but we had to do a lot of work on the back end to qualify people that visited. And to Ariana's point, they weren't required to engage. Of course, you don't want to require that, but they would come into your booth and they didn't have to have a conversation with you at all. You didn't see their face. They entered a chat room, you chatted with them, but they could just turn it off. They could not welcome a private chat. And so again, a lot of back end work to figure out of all the people that visited the booth, who was quality, and again, a lot of work there. And now this one, I'm sorry, Sherry, did you?
Go ahead, Howard, please.
And then with this one, I thought it combined a number of great things. Obviously, we've got this open Q&A at the end, so everybody can see us live. The one thing I would say is with the recordings, if it went a little long, it got cut off because you had the auto feature turned on. And so I know Ariana's got cut off by a little bit. I know mine got cut off by a little bit. So that's just one thing. It didn't extend, I think, because obviously you're trying to manage the day. But otherwise, I mean, on site, this is a wonderful event. Online, the content's always superior. I mean, I love the content of this conference, and hopefully we can get back on site and deliver it in a hybrid model. That's one of the things that I'd like to see the organization I volunteer at do, the on-site and a hybrid, because I think that you open it up to have more attendees, better registration, better revenue, all good things.
Yeah, I think, through our community, I'd love to set up another day where we can, Ariana brought up this discussion of hybrid or tribrid model. For us, at our community, we've always had a hybrid model, but I think, and Ariana kind of put this for me kind of full circle the other day when she said, it's not great experience for the virtual because we are all live. So how do you create that experience? I will say, Ron, from us, just for lessons learned, we had a lot of functionality in this platform, and we tried to use a lot of functionality in the platform. And for instance, we had the ability for participants to meet an online chat, live video. Kevin and I were, I believe, because I was looking at stats throughout the day, I think Kevin and I, and then I saw from Tim that, I don't know, Ariana, if he asked you or whoever did the chat, but the chat that we thought might work well between the vendors and the attendees did not. Now that could have probably been because of the design of our program, because we had so much content, right? So I think it's about really thinking through your participants and how, one, they're going to engage. I mean, we've seen organizations have no chat and don't like it. And I asked that question to a lot of the people even on this video right now. What is that balance? And there's some organizations, some of the tech groups, they don't want the chat. They just want the content to run, right? So I think you've got to think through what you want that experience to be, and then how you create that. And we went back and forth of, do we do this over 2 days? Do we do it one day? Is the day too long? Ariana talked about a series. I think we're all just trying to navigate that. And frankly, I would love, as we're kind of having this conversation over the next 20 minutes, what, as attendees, what you guys liked out of this event today, what you didn't like, what can be improved upon. We've already made notes to ourselves. You know, we always want to be better, but not only that, you know, what is that time frame that this audience wants to engage? You know, is it get it all done in a day, a half a day, 2 hours? You know, what does that look like? What are you wanting to do when we're online? We did have about 145 people participate all day. So again, I was looking at the stats behind the scenes, so that was awesome. And I thought most of you would have dropped off after a couple hours, so I'm really happy about that. So you know, but I hadn't, you know, I had no idea until you do it, right? So can I just want to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about, you know, from either Matt or Jake, you know, when you talked about content strategy earlier today, how long does a typical content strategy engagement take?
I would say, I mean, obviously that depends. We talked a bit about how associations have, you know, massive amounts of content. And if you've got, you know, 5,000 content items on your website, you know, that could take 3-4 months. And if you just have a simple marketing site, like a brochure site, you can get that done in a couple weeks. So, I mean, things like taxonomy with, you know, say 500 pieces of content, it might take 2 days. And then we say maybe like 3 to 4 weeks for multi-site just to get that taxonomy piece. But I'd say a typical engagement for us is about 3 months. So I don't know what Matt thinks, but that's what I would say.
I would agree that it would kind of tend on scope. It can kind of change based on kind of the number of people who are participating in the conversation and the kind of brainstorming stage that goes into it as well. I would say it might be a little bit longer than that estimate that Jake gave for his, probably about 3 months to go through the full kind of exploration, make decisions, and then start acting on them as well.
Great. Eric, I guess maybe that's a follow-up question for you and or Dan. You know, when you're looking at what you guys have been able to produce and your overall content strategy, I guess from an executive level perspective, like you can, you know, Jake and Matt is more on the execution probably side, but how long did it take you to kind of get everybody on board and moving in the same direction and coming up with an overall plan for AANA? Oh, we can't hear you, Eric, or at least I can't.
Well, you're
We
muted.
cannot hear you.
Or your volume.
We cannot hear you. Well, Dan, maybe you can answer for Eric. Maybe you know some. You probably have some insights until we see.
Hopefully, Eric's much more eloquent.
Eric,
go ahead. Use your phone.
Use your phone. Yeah. Is it on mute?
You're on your phone.
Eric, you can just dance your answer if needed.
Just put it on speaker. Get off your earpods and put it on speakerphone.
Well, I think go ahead, Eric. Can we hear you now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, who needs AirPods? All right, sorry, buddy. So I think really interesting question around how long does it take? How long is it supposed to take? And going in with a plan versus we just canceled a meeting and we have to put it on in 3 months. So what really happened for us is we need to have this meeting. We also need to have content that supports it. And how do we put on live programming at the same time? Because we knew that the content in addition to the live programming was going to secure sponsorship and advertising dollars. And so we really said, we don't have a choice as a company. Let's figure this out. And so working across teams in our professional development team, our education team, marketing, and our meetings team, we really started to come together to say, what does this look like from a programming standpoint when we're talking about content? Thinking through taxonomy, thinking about different sites and things along those lines. We kind of did it on the fly. So in my experience, we would normally take that original We're Guilty of the website with just under 5,000 pages. So the approach that we would take would be very different when looking at all of our content across all of our properties. This was, how do we create content to secure sponsorship dollars and advertising revenue and create a great experience inside of 3 months? So we kind of did get all the right people in the room, everybody agree on the same goals, and then move together to put tactics in place as fast as we could.
Great.
Not always the recommended version.
However, on
That's
your
what we did.
Eric, on the LMS side though, and moving into the Netflix model like we talked about earlier, you had more time for that. You did take a more kind of a traditional strategic approach. Maybe speak to that as well if you could.
Sure. So on the subscription model side, when we're talking about how do we rethink the education that we're providing to members, that was a lot more long tail. We started out with the quantitative and qualitative research to understand what members were looking for. And then we started to talk from an educational strategy about the content that we're providing and what platform might help us do that. So that's where we started to have a kind of a bigger conversation of what would that look like over time? How would we work within the organization to do that? Traditionally, content has been created in a silo in our organization. And so we really wanted to have a more consistent strategy across the company. And so we started to have those conversations and look at the technology we were going to use for our Netflix model. Everybody inside of A&A hates that I still call it the Netflix model since we have a name, but for all of you that know Netflix, it's much easier to explain it that way. And so that's how we landed on the worker bee model and platform in the end for our subscription.
Great. Nick, do you have any thoughts in terms of when you guys kind of moved over to converted from in-person to virtual and your overall content strategy, what that was like for your organization?
It doesn't sound too different from Eric's. We have all of these face-to-face meetings planned for the latter half of the year, and actually throughout the year. But the heavy lifting was the later months. This final quarter actually will be the heaviest lifting, and we had to pivot quickly. We already had a platform. We wanted to use our LMS for virtual conferences, but we had a homegrown platform. We were doing virtual conferences prior to COVID that were just like one day. Maybe like 4 or 5 sessions, no networking. It's strictly like content dump, no sponsorship, no exhibit options, advertising options. And that's pretty standard for our mission is strictly education. We do offer very limited sponsorship opportunities, but we want to make sure that everything that we're offering is at least perceived as not being a sales pitch. So anyway, we used the existing platform. It was really pulling people out of their comfort zone and getting all of the right people in the room, so to speak, not the actual room, and conveying a process to them that wasn't already figured out or mapped out, and walking them through that. Now, what we've come back with from an attendee perspective is just, I don't know that there's been disappointment in the lack of engagement or networking opportunities, so much as there is, at least internally, this like, what else can we do to create a buzz around the education? Because as I mentioned with Michelle in my interview, we're all really fatigued with all of these Zoom meetings, and we have to do that for work, and then you're telling us we have to go do that for this for a conference or an educational opportunity, where normally it was very exciting to be like, oh, I'm finally getting out of the office and I'm going to go and I'm going to be with a bunch of my contemporaries and learn something new, and I'll get to go out for dinner, and there'll be some like subtle perks that like come with that travel opportunity. All of that's gone.
Yeah.
Additionally, all of our speakers are volunteer. So now we're asking them to do all the heavy lifting. We're putting together these great presentations and slideshows and whatnot, and they don't have the face-to-face networking opportunity. They don't get to stay in the nice hotel, and their per diem costs aren't covered. It's just like they got to go to their own refrigerator, sleep in their own bed, and do all the same amount of work. So it's been a nightmare. It's been an absolute nightmare. yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's what life's been like at the foundation, and we're just still scrambling, and we're just holding on to hope that we can get back to some level of normal, and we're trying to recognize that it's not going to be like as quick of a shift back to normal as it was into the abnormal. We're going to have to find some sort of iterative process of like moving people and accommodating people back into the face-to-face environment, or accommodating them at some iteration in between the face-to-face and the virtual world.
Yeah, that's really the, I think the issue that we're all dealing with. It was, I think Sharon will remember the conversation I had with her, I think in March or April, and there was a conference that got canceled and it got postponed. And I said, well, I would never go to that conference if I have to wear a mask. I'm not like, I go there to network. I want to meet friends. I'm not doing that. Well, fast forward to today. Any of you that have a conference, I'm there. I got my mask on. I've got my hand sanitizer. I'm ready to go. Because Nick, to your point, like that is right. Like this can be, you can make this fun and we can do, whatever, happy hours at the end of the day or all those things. But you're right. We're going to our own fridge. I don't get to go out with Dan and, get a bottle of Prisoner. Like none of that is happening. So Dan can email me about it and that's great. I have those memories, but this is, so anyway.
Are you sure you have those memories?
Valid point. So Sharon, just to kind of switch topics just a little bit, it's kind of during your presentation, it seemed like you were a little bit down on the future of certification. Is that true? Is that something we need to be considering?
Well, I'm worried about, so in the association world, and I don't know that this is that unusual in business in general, we tend to really lean into the things that we've been successful at in the past. And I think that the generational changes in the workforce, so certainly the millennials, but especially the Gen Z generation coming in, it's going to make that long path to traditional high stakes certification a difficult one to tread. I don't think that the interest is going to be there in the way that it's been in the past. So my caution to associations that are really successful with certifications right now is just kind of stay tuned to what's coming next. And I think several of us talked about stackable credentials or more of a building block process to getting credentials as opposed to kind of that 18 month rigorous study to get a credential. So in general, no, I'm not down on certification per se. What I'm worried about and what I'm warning against is leaning on that very successful, durable product and kind of being blinded to the changes that are taking place based on our new members' sensibilities.
Kind of a follow-up question, and again, this was some conversations I've had with several of you over the last couple of weeks, but do you believe, or when will it happen, that face-to-face will end up at the same level pre-pandemic? Sharon saying no, Ariana saying no, Dan saying no, Michelle?
No, I find it really hard to believe that it will. I think in many ways, like Nick mentioned, there's some great benefits to face, and we do all love that opportunity to connect. And I know for me, especially because I'm based so far away from you guys, I love getting over to see you all at the conference and actually talk to you in person. But in many other ways, this has opened up a chance for a lot of people to participate in these kind of events that they didn't have before because they couldn't get the budget to travel. Or a lot of associations have kind of started by offering some of these initial virtual events for free. So they've had a chance to taste it and see what the education programs are like, what the content is like in these conferences. And, they might very well now pay for the next one. So, it's hard to see. I really think it's going to be that kind of hybrid thing. And like Sharon was saying about the credentials and the certification programs, it's about adapting to what people need in the moment. And it's been amazing to see so many associations do that so well over the last few months. But I think we're going to see a lot more of it over the next few months to come as we kind of all grapple with, and I hate that phrase, the new normal, but it is going to be a completely new normal, I think, as we go forward.
If I could add just very briefly to Michelle's point, I had 3 meetings today talking about our November meeting that has been canceled, our February meeting that's probably not happening in person, and how we can't have our normal programming at Congress in next August in Texas
Wow.
because of social distancing.
Yeah.
Those 3 meetings all happened today. So when we think about the landscape of what we're working on from a planning standpoint, I hope most are looking at literally next August to understand how their meeting might be affected. So we're making technology plans, member engagement plans, and programming plans right now for literally the next 11 months, if not past that. I think that's pretty realistic of where I assume a lot of us are having those conversations in the association space.
I think the other thing we've learned from this is, we've kept a big ring around our annual conference content for those 15% of the members that come, and now we've let that cat out of the bag, and we've seen that engagement can go up, and when engagement goes up, all things go up: membership, revenue, exhibitors, sponsorship, and so really I think members are going to demand that level of content quality, and ideally at some point have that ability to choose: do I hop on a plane to get it, or do I go online to get it, or do I go into on demand to get it? And as opposed to treating it as just a silo.
Mm-hmm. So Ron, I'm going to go back to, I read your question about the Q&A and the ACOEM and Digital Now. I did participate in both of those meetings. The reason, I'm just going to be quite frank with you, the reason that we did not do that with this program was just because we are new to the platform, and it created too much risk and anxiety for me and Kevin to try to make sure without having, somebody, we went through this analysis of what we needed to provide today. And actually the easiest thing for us to have done was to just run it through Zoom all day, because we know the platform and we could just do that. So that was kind of our, let's just start there. And then we kind of matured a little bit from that decision. But now that we've got the platform underneath our belts, and if we would use it again, I do definitely think that we would break it up with either more discussions like this or more Q&A at the end, or during the program. But Ron, that's kind of some of the reason. And that was, I know I talked to Don after his, and he used the same platform, and he gave us a little bit of concern because, as you guys said, they were cutting off. His problem, he said, was that the live feed wasn't coming in soon enough. So I think there's just pros and cons to everything that you do and choices that you're making during an event. So hopefully the things that you're learning, as Howard says, as the different events, you guys can take away the good and just try to learn the lessons of the bad, or the things that where you can have some hiccups as we're all kind of learning and discovering here. I said, as you guys, as we were coming on live and we were here earlier, I said to Ariana, I said, I went from this, when we started .org community, I said, wow, meeting planners, like, this is a really, really hard job. And I thought that was the hardest thing I ever had to do until we put on a live virtual meeting. So all of you digital production people that are on this meeting and call right now, wow, hats off to you, because the first time around, I think, is really, really, really challenging, because you're learning new technologies. You're thinking about design of an event. You're thinking about what your members want, how, or if, what that engagement looks like, coordinating all the content. It's very different than just, our biggest problem was asking Howard if he had his presentation to us before he got on the plane, right? Like, that was worst case, because we wanted to do a run through and make sure, but now you're collecting videos, and then somebody has an edit and they're bringing it back. It's a lot of moving parts. So, and then just so you guys know, those of you who haven't gone through an event, this weekend, we ended up running into some issues, and we actually ended up hiring support staff behind the scenes for us that worked with us on Sunday, Monday, and then today. So you guys don't even know that that was going on, because at the last minute, you got people emailing saying, can I get into the platform? Can you register me? All those types of things. So those of you that are attending that have very small staff, I would highly recommend you have 1 or 2 people behind the scenes, and they don't necessarily have to be technical folks, but they have to help people, like, you know, log in. We had questions like, well, I don't see where the participant button is, right? Like, well, it's right there, but like helping those people. And as when you're trying to produce the event, even when a lot of it's recorded, there's a lot of those moving parts behind the scenes. So in the next like couple minutes, I'm just going to go through really quick, because I know I see you guys shaking your heads, but I know you probably have 1 or 2 key things that people should think about, whether it's, you know, managing, running an event, how to produce the event, or from the, you know, digital strategy, content strategy side of things. So Michelle, I'll pick on you first.
Sure. I suppose my key would be to not just think of your event as a one-off. Think of the ways that you can continue the networking, continue the conversations, and continue the learning after the event. Bring those people into your LMS and get them involved and continuing to participate over time.
Great. Eric.
I'm going to say 2 things very quickly. One would be think about the long term. So I just mentioned that I'm looking already a year from now and what this is going to look like. So what you're building now is going to be transformed, but if you set it up properly, it could get you to where you need to be faster and last longer, rather than throwing something at the wall, see if it works, and then changing it every 3 months. So number 1 is think long term and how can you build the best base right now. Number 2 is along those lines, how do you constantly evolve to create a better experience for your members? That's where we spend quite a bit of time of saying, hey, we had some success, but what would we tweak? What would we change? And how do we keep getting better in every event? And I copied that from Michelle. So thank you, Michelle, for giving that to me too.
Dan, I'll pick on you next.
I think it's, you know, I think A&A, our experience there and with others that are collaborating across the organization, end up by nature thinking long-term and end up thinking that I am going to do multiple events. I am going to do virtual. I'm going to do hybrid. I need to have a more accessible on-demand experience and multimedia. And I need to improve the engagement right across the board. And so when you start thinking that is my objective, it forces you to go, this isn't a department's job. It is the organization's job. And I think that requires the CEO to get involved in digital transformation. It requires, you know, people like the CEO at A&A, empowering people like Eric to have that ability to put those teams together, to go out and have a vision, even though you can break it down into milestones and, you know, have events and have LMS and have other milestones. It all builds upon each other so that the next event, you're focusing more on the experience and the content, and you're not starting from scratch.
Great, thanks, Dan. Ariana.
Sure, I'm going to use my time instead to give some words of encouragement. You know, this is actually a really unique time because all of us are facing very similar challenges and questions and experimenting. And you know, I found some of the most valuable takeaways that the lunchtime discussion of sharing each other's experiences. If we could somehow hear from every attendee about, you know, the best decision they made this last year and the worst decision they made last year, imagine the learning that can come from that. So my I guess maybe the words of encouragement is more share your stories with everyone, because this is the time that we can learn from each other.
Yeah, thanks for actually, you kind of reminded me to kind of mention that we actually are doing monthly conversations called critical conversations. They don't have necessarily a topic. They're kind of hot item issues. Last month, we talked about people going back to school or kids going back to school online and trying to work from home. And we've had a lot, we've also have a half-hour meeting every other week called In Lieu of Lunch. Most of those have been dominated by virtual meetings. And there's other ways that we're going to look at creating some additional conversations around sponsorship opportunities and how that's changing and things like that. But with that said, Jake, I'll have you go next.
Sure. I'd say, I mean, everybody that I've talked to would agree that virtual events are not going anywhere. The hybrid model is really going to be here to stay. But we're kind of looking at it as an opportunity. I mean, it really can be a new business model for associations. So I mean, there's tons more engagement and registrants for virtual events. So those are potential members in a lot of cases. So it gives the opportunity for more engagement, getting more people interested and enthusiastic about your organization. So it really is a great opportunity, and it's a bummer that we can't all be together and go out to dinners and happy hours and all that. But it can be a really nice new business model and revenue stream.
Great. Thanks, Jake. Sharon.
I think that what I would say is diversify. I think that's a lesson that we learned in 2008 with the recession, and we're learning now. So let's not go from overdependence on face-to-face annual conference revenue to overdependence on face-to-face and virtual conference revenue or hybrid revenue. Let's use the technology to diversify our offerings, as I think Dan was saying, so that people can stay engaged day in and day out, not just once or twice a year.
Great. Thanks, Sharon. Matt?
Yeah, from a virtual conference point of view, I would say when it comes to a lot of the conversations are focused around kind of engagement and the networking aspects. Something we found successful is really let some of those creative team members you have, or even some of the association platforms, let those creative ideas come to light. Use those in the virtual platforms, the environments that you can use to do something like whether it's chocolate tasting or doing a virtual wine tasting, doing trivia, using some of the game sites that are out there. Use some of those to get engagement. Also, people have a lot of interest that way. And I think a lot of groups know their member base enough to what will be helpful to all those attendees as well. So
Terrific. Thanks, Matt. And Nick?
Yeah, so I'm going to throw a word out there that probably none of us want to use because of the negative connotations, the obvious ones, but failure. Like, don't be afraid to fail at something. We're I think mostly that the perception of failure it stops with us. We think we've failed, and yet we're not perceived as failing. And I think that's where we're going to learn and have the best stories to share. Going back to Ariana's point, or some of the examples that Matt gave, like, don't be afraid to try something new. I think for us internally, as we're ramping up these teams and pushing into a new area with virtual delivery, there's a fear of not delivering on expectations, whether it's the executive expectations, the governance expectations, or our customers' expectations, or even our own self-imposed expectations, that we're going to fall short of those, and then we find ourselves in this like paralysis of not being able to move forward with what we need to do on a day-to-day basis, and we have to have, as leaders, we have to enable a certain level of failure as being healthy.
This is great points and great way to wrap up this conversation. Kevin, well, I will turn it over to you to kind of wrap up our day and sign everyone off.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. A couple of years ago when we put out our book, we didn't really know what we could call it, from a title perspective. But now today, it's probably one of the best titles out there because it's called Positioning for Success in the Era of Disruption. It's almost like we wrote the book during the pandemic, which we really didn't. We wrote it back like in 2017. But, reviewing those stories and advice is still so true today. And I think you heard a lot from everyone today about what to do, failure. And also another one is now is a great time to experiment, increase that tolerance for experimentation. And yes, failure is probably going to be an option, and that's fine. At least you're doing something about it. The worst thing you can do right now is do nothing. And I know Sharon shared a quote from Teddy Roosevelt about that. So don't do nothing, do something, experiment, and tell that to your boards and your staff. It's okay. If it didn't work out, great. Get that feedback and make it better the next time around.
Hey, Kevin,
so I know,
can I add something from a database perspective? I was a little bit different than the other presenters, but make sure that you don't have this this activity sit in a silo. Integrate it to your AMS so you can measure member engagement and have that data flow back and forth. It's super critical. So I would just add that that point to this conversation.
No,
Yes.
absolutely.
That's great, Howard.
So anyway, I know we're a little bit over, and thank you everyone for your patience and everything else. I know we had a little hookup there this morning, but we did get the right video in from Sharon instead of the commercial. But anyway, you know, what's a virtual event without a little?
Yeah, make sure you take out all your test data. Just saying.
Yeah. So anyway, I just want to thank everyone, all of our attendees for staying in there with us for most of the day. I mean, that's a pretty long day. And also thank you very much to all of our sponsors and partners and speakers here. Certainly we could not have done this without your partnership, encouragement, and advice. So keep bringing it on. We're flexible. We want to make it better for everyone's experience. So I'll just close with that. And again, thank you so much. And we'll hope to see you on our next one.
Great, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Take care.